While the state shores up its finances, Congress is struggling with not one, but two potential government shutdown deadlines, racing against the clock to pass a short-term spending bill by midnight tomorrow, as a snowstorm slated to hit Washington, D.C. threatens to derail the whole thing. The Senate's done their part, voting to approve a stopgap bill. Now it's on to the House, and I'm joined by Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, who's in the Capitol for the latest. Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time. Let me ask you first about this log jam that's happening really over aid with Ukraine and looking at the border policies here in the U.S. What's the likelihood that the House will take up a vote in time to avert a shutdown tomorrow night?
So I think we're going to avert a shutdown. We're working, we actually have a snowstorm coming here into Washington. So I know the Senate's working right now to get the continuing resolution over to the House. So this won't actually be passing our new budget, which we still haven't been able to do. This will be continuing last year's budget so we can keep the government open as we continue to work to resolve some of the issues we still have, getting the appropriations bills done. And even the basic budget continues to run into snags with the House Freedom Caucus. The Speaker announces how we're going to move forward, and then the far right of his party undermines him and tries to stop all forward movement. So we're continuing to work forward. I think we have a plan for a continuing resolution. But then as far as the supplemental, that really remains in limbo here. And, you know, it really is egregious at this point. I think there is wide bipartisan support for addressing our border, for security at the border, for better processing, better resources at our border. And that has been put forward. That was put forward months ago with a supplemental by the president for more resources at the border. And then the Senate has been negotiating, and they have come to, I think after the negotiations stalled before the holidays, it sounds like they have been making great progress moving forward on that. And yet the Freedom Caucus,
I mean, that's my question.
They're not going to do it.
Yeah, can you do the same? And right, we'll clarify, this is a stopgap bill that needs to be, this continuing resolution that needs to be voted on by tomorrow night, not the full spending plan. But it seems like you all are in the same position you were in previously when we had House Speaker McCarthy. How do you get around this then?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And again, my concern was always that it doesn't get easier when you get into a presidential year. And we've already, of course, heard former President Trump suggesting to not do things, don't get a border solution, wait until I get into office. So again, just trying to undermine the functioning of the country for pure partisan politics, which is the very opposite of what we need to see from our elected officials when we have so much at stake. It's not just what's going on here at home, but we look across the world at a lot of the crises that we are instrumental in helping to manage so that we can get better outcomes for people across the world, but also for people here at home. And that's really remains in question because again and again and again, as we attempt to find different ways to move forward in the House, we are stonewalled by the Freedom Caucus, and it does appear as if it's become almost unmanageable for the GOP to have the majority. We see a very different Congress in the last session. We see all of the bipartisan work, huge, expansive bipartisan bills like the bipartisan infrastructure law that we work together to get across the finish line with, remember, also very small majorities in the Democratic majority. We see in the Senate right now, very small majorities, but a willingness to work together to continue working for the American people. And yet the House GOP simply cannot govern. When you see the GOP in the majority in these legislative bodies, they simply can't govern at this point. And it's become so egregious. We're seeing this kind of breaking point as we try just to get the budget passed, just to get the supplemental passed. So it's really unclear how and if we're going to be able to do that supplemental with that critical border support.
Well, let me switch gears then. Looking at the frustration that has been in Congress, you had a really good quarter in terms of fundraising. Obviously, you are up for re-election this year, but there are other potential races looming down the pike. What are you thinking about in terms of a gubernatorial run?
Well, as you can imagine right now, given how I've laid out what's going on in the House, what I am focused on is making sure we get back into the majority in the House. There is so much that we passed in the last Congress that is good for New Jersey. So whether it is the Gateway Tunnel project, continuing to invest in research and development, I've seen huge expansions in businesses in my district. We need to invest in our schools. One of the biggest concerns I hear in my district is the businesses don't have enough of a workforce. They need more people to fuel the economy as we move into this new economy. So that's what I'm focused on now. I do think we have a great shot at future planning for the state. I think the new economy we're building is going to work very, very well for New Jersey.
All right, let me ask you one more. One of the items you mentioned that there's a lot that you're focused on for the district. Looking at AI, artificial intelligence, and protecting students from what we call deep fakes, which is interesting because Governor Murphy in his State of the State just announced that he wants New Jersey to become this generative hub for AI. What's the issue that you're looking at? What's your concern?
Wow, I have a lot of concerns, and I say that because I understand both sides of this. So part of the legislation that I'm working on right now is around deep fakes, as you mentioned. We saw in Westfield young girls, 14-year-olds, whose faces were taken and put on top of naked bodies. And then that was shared among a lot of the students. So it looked as if they were naked pictures of these young 14-year-old girls. And that was, as you can imagine, a horrible, horrible experience for them. And as their parents went forward to try to address this, they found there were almost no regulations around these deep fakes. And so that's what we're working on here in the House. We've introduced a bill to provide penalties for these deep fakes so that we can have some regulation around them, and there's a means to address this. But to your broader question, I think what you have said is what keeps me up at night. There is an incredible amount of opportunity in some of the new technologies. They will change the very way people live, often for the better. When we talk about AI, when we talk about future quantum, when we talk about some of the new research and development into different energy. But I don't think when it comes to our children, we have appropriately addressed the downside risk. So I know to a lot of people who maybe don't have school-age children and haven't seen the horrible impacts of social media and the internet on sometimes very, very young children. I know that I sound like some 1950s era conservative mom that, I want to shut down everything and I'm a technophobe. That is not true. I love the new technology. I'm supporting advances in research and development. We can do so much, but we have got to do a better job protecting our children. We are simply not doing enough in this area, and it is harming a whole generation of kids right now.
Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, always good to have you on the show. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.